I wasn't supposed to hear them. But the old hallway vent carried every word. Your sister? She's not getting a single thing, Dad said calmly. Ice clinked against his glass. Mom let out the same fake laugh she always used when gossiping over wine. Elise has always been different, Mom replied. She never really fit into this family. She can figure life out on her own. Then Dad said the words that shattered everything. We'll sign the papers this week. The trust goes to Ivy. Elise doesn't need to know until it's finished. I froze. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stared at the cheap painting above the guest bed while my heart pounded so hard it hurt. My name is Elise Monroe. I'm 32, single, no children, and apparently invisible in my own family. The next morning I smiled like nothing had happened. I poured coffee, hugged my younger sister Ivy goodbye, and wished everyone a great day. Not one of them realized I'd heard everything. That evening, back in my condo in Washington, D.C., I opened my laptop. I logged into every shared account they had forgotten I could still access. Then I quietly started separating what was legally mine. I didn't steal $1. I simply reclaimed what I had earned. Dad had held my share of the down payment from a jointly owned property. The house had been sold months earlier, yet my money never arrived. I transferred my portion. Mom had convinced me to open a joint savings account years ago. Every deposit with my name on it came back to me. Then came the trust. That was the difficult part. Before Grandpa passed away, he made me a co-beneficiary. Somehow Mom and Dad had tried to change the paperwork without ever telling me. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had handed me a signed copy of the original trust. Keep this, he'd said with a smile. Just in case. I scanned the document, uploaded it to the trust portal, and reported the recent changes for legal review. By the next morning, the trust administrator had frozen every transaction until the documents could be verified. Only then did the panic begin. Ivy texted first. Asterisk, did you do something to the accounts? Mom and Dad are freaking out. Sis. I answered with one sentence. Asterisk, I'm only taking back what's already mine. Sis. She never replied. Dad called. I let it ring. His first voicemail sounded angry. The second sounded desperate. Elise, sweetheart, there has to be some misunderstanding. Please call us. We're only trying to do what's best for the family. Maybe those words would have worked when I was 20. Not anymore. Instead of calling back, I emailed the original trust agreement to the family attorney, attached Grandpa's signed copy, and copied the estate lawyer who had supervised everything years earlier. My message contained only one sentence. Asterisk, please stop misrepresenting my legal rights. Sis. Then I blocked their numbers. Not because I hated them. Because I finally chose peace over permission. A week later, Ivy appeared outside my office carrying a cup of coffee. Her eyes were red from crying. You really think Grandpa wanted this? She whispered. I met her eyes. No, I said quietly. I think Mom and Dad left me no other choice. And I think you know that. She didn't answer. Maybe because she couldn't. Growing up, Ivy was always the easy child. The one everyone praised for being sweet and agreeable. I was the difficult one. I asked questions. I noticed missing details. I refused to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. They taught me to be strong. They just never imagined that strength would one day be used against them. That Friday Mom sent flowers. Peonies. Ironically, they were my least favorite. He had never remembered that. The note read. Asterisk, families aren't perfect but love always wins. Let's talk. Sis. I dropped the bouquet into the office trash without opening it again. This wasn't about one argument. It was about years of being overlooked. Being left out of family vacations while still expected to pay part of the cost. Watching Dad borrow my first tax refund for a business emergency that somehow never ended. Seeing Ivy receive endless second chances while I was told to work harder, complain less, and be grateful. This wasn't one betrayal. It was a lifetime of them. And for the first time I wasn't asking for fairness. I was enforcing it. For years I spent my life trying to prove I was enough. Now I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something far more valuable. I had the truth. The next morning I filed the final paperwork. A formal request to separate every remaining shared asset tied to my name. The response came sooner than I expected. Asterisk, based on the documentation provided and the disputed activity, your request has been approved. Sis. Just like that, it was over. No courtroom drama. No screaming matches. Just signatures, legal documents, and a door closing forever. That evening, I cooked myself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and played Grandpa's favorite jazz records. I raised my glass toward his framed photo. "You always saw me," I whispered. "Even when no one else did." For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. A few weeks later, the real truth surfaced. Not because of me. Because of the family lawyer. During the investigation, they discovered Mom had forged Grandpa's signature on an amendment that completely removed me from the trust. The document had been dated after Grandpa's death. Handwriting experts confirmed the signature was fake. The amendment was declared invalid, and the law firm immediately dropped my parents as clients. That's when Ivy called again. This time she wasn't defensive. He sounded broken. "They lied to me too," she whispered. "They told me you didn't want any inheritance. They said you were ashamed of us." I stayed quiet. "I believed them," she continued. "For years. I believed every word. I'm sorry." The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Finally I answered. "You wanted to believe the best in them." I paused. "That wasn't your mistake. Just don't let it happen again." She didn't argue. She simply whispered, "I won't." When the call ended, there were no promises to become a happy family again. No dramatic reconciliation. Just honesty. For the first time in our lives. Thanksgiving arrived a month later. I didn't attend. I never planned to. That evening Ivy sent a text. Mom cried through dinner. Dad barely spoke. They told everyone you stole the family money. I smiled sadly and locked my phone. Because I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply stopped letting them take from me. For years they built their lives on one assumption. That I'd always stay quiet. That I'd pay the bills. That I'd forgive every betrayal. That I'd never fight back. The moment I stopped playing that role, everything they built started to crumble. A few days later, the family's realtor called me. He sounded confused. "Your name is still listed on the property deed," she explained. "They told me everything had already been transferred." "It hasn't," I replied. "I had intentionally left it untouched. Not because I wanted the house. Because I wanted the truth recorded exactly as it happened. Instead of claiming the property for myself, I transferred my share into a housing charity that Grandpa had supported for years. Then my attorney mailed them the legal notice." Ivy later admitted Mom cried for 2 straight days. I didn't celebrate. But I didn't regret it either. When someone spends years telling you that you don't belong, believe them. Then build a place where no one can erase your name. 3 months later I saw my parents again. It happened at a community art gallery. The city had restored Grandpa's photography collection and organized a public exhibition. He had spent decades photographing ordinary people whose stories were often forgotten. Quietly, without anyone knowing, I helped secure the grant that made the exhibit possible. I never told my parents. I never invited them. Yet they came anyway. Mom stood near the back of the room, dressed as though she were attending a formal gala. Dad stood silently beside her. Neither of them approached me. As the slideshow began, Grandpa's handwritten captions appeared beneath every photograph. Then one picture filled the screen. I was 10 years old, asleep on the front porch with a book resting on my chest. Behind me I heard Dad take a shaky breath. "He loved you the most," he said softly. "We just didn't know how to handle that." I kept my eyes on the photograph. "You didn't have to do anything," I answered. "You just had to stop pretending I didn't exist." Before Mom could respond, the final image appeared. It wasn't a photograph. It was an empty picture frame with one handwritten note taped beneath it. Some people aren't truly seen until they're gone. Slowly I turned around. For the first time in my life I didn't see heroes. I didn't see villains. I simply saw 2 ordinary people living with the consequences of their own choices. They didn't apologize. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They quietly put on their coats and walked away. And this time, I didn't follow them. Because I finally understood something. This story had never been about revenge. It was about taking my life back. Using part of Grandpa's inheritance, I created an art scholarship in his name for students who rarely had opportunities like mine. I never added my own name. I didn't need recognition. When the city announced the scholarship, Ivy forwarded me the article with a single message. Asterisk, now that's a real legacy. Sis. I smiled. We still weren't close. But healing doesn't always sound like, I love you. Sometimes it sounds like respect. Months later, a package arrived at my condo with no return address. Inside was Grandpa's old Leica camera, the one he had never allowed anyone else to touch. Taped beneath it was a folded note in his handwriting. Asterisk for Elise, the one who always saw clearly. Sis. I held the camera for a long time. Then I stepped onto my balcony and breathed in the cold winter air. My parents built a family where there was no place for me. So I built something better. A life filled with honesty, peace, purpose. And this time my name could never be erased.